to switch over and talk a little bit about the types of questions that you can ask. Surveys can include two basic types of questions, open-ended and closed-ended. And an open-ended question requires respondents to just generate their own answers. And then you can have closed-ended questions, and with closed-ended questions, you can have multiple choice, rating, semantic, differential, rank ordered. Those measurement scales are great for measuring someone's attitude, behavior, knowledge, or frequency of use of something. And we're going to break these down and talk about them individually, with first addressing open-ended questions. Open-ended questions give respondents freedom in answering questions and an opportunity to provide some in-depth responses. They also give the researcher the option to ask, well, why did you say that? Let's have you explain this answer, because you've given them a chance to elaborate. It also helps because you can get answers that researchers did not foresee in designing the questionnaire, answers that may suggest possible relationships with other variables. And for example, which radio station do you have programmed on the buttons of your vehicle when you drive most often? And a manager of a local radio station might just expect to see a list of the radio stations the respondent listens to. However, there could be other responses like, I have no idea, I thought the stations were programmed by a car dealer. And so that makes the radio station manager kind of step back and reconsider, the perspectives of the radio listeners and what they do. And I use that in farm broadcasting since it's one way to disseminate information to consumers and to farmers, and how important that can be to communicate about farming issues and food practices. Now, there are some issues with open-ended questions. They take a lot of time and effort to fill out, so they're frequently skipped over. And then it can be really difficult for you to analyze the data because you have to use content analysis. And content analysis has to be completed for each open-ended question to produce data that can be then tabulated. So a content analysis groups common responses into categories, making the question closed-ended essentially. And unfortunately, open-ended questions cause a great deal of frustration because respondents' answers can be really bizarre, and sometimes respondents don't even understand the question and provide responses that are not relevant to what you asked. Multiple choice questions are used to just give you predetermined answer choices. They can be done dichotomously or multichotomously. You can do a forced choice where they have to answer the question and choose only one answer. Or you can do a checklist where you can have select all that apply and allow them to pick more than one answer. The one thing is that as a researcher, you have to do a really good literature review and be able to provide a mutually exhaustive list of responses that could be used for your respondents to answer that question. And they can't be overlapping the same answer in more than one answer choice. So a really good example here that's appropriate would be, what is your gender? Female, male, prefer not to answer. So we have a multichotomous answer. That's a forced choice. They can only select one. Mutually exclusive, we don't have female and male, or male and female, and so that would work. I see this an issue with some questions I see with multiple choice would be, how many years have you been teaching? And they'll say less than a year, from 1 year to 5 years, 5 years to 10 years. Because if I've been teaching 5 years, I could select two answer choices, 1 to 5 and 5 to 10. That is wrong. You can only allow them to pick one answer choice because that one answer is only available in one answer choice. So I'd have to say less than 1 year, 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, 11 to 15 years, and make sure that I am mutually exclusive and exhaustive. One of my favorite types of questions is a Likert Scale or rating. It's perhaps the most used type of question in social science research because you can measure people's attitudes, their behavior, their perceptions of barriers, their benefits. You can, doing something, you can measure their frequency of use of resources, or you can ask them how likely it is that they would do something on a scale. And it's called a Likert Scale. And they're usually 5-point or 7-point. An example would be from strongly disagree to strongly agree, or from very dissatisfied or very satisfied. And you code these responses consistently, so the high score tends to indicate something positive, like very satisfied or strongly agree. And then your lower scores would be very dissatisfied or strongly disagree. And it's a nice way to measure attitude, behavior, knowledge. But one thing you have to do is make sure you state both sides, positive and negative, in the question stem by asking either or types of questions. To what extent do you agree or disagree with a statement? It's easier for people to find work in this community than it was about a year ago. Now, that is okay, because you're not saying to what extent do you agree that it's easier for people to find work in this community than it was about a year ago. That would imply that you think it is easier. By giving the two options, you're being more objective. But we could improve this question. One way I thought about improving it was just totally rewording this question. How do you think that the task of finding work in this community has changed since about a year ago? And then do something like, it is easier, it is the same, it is more difficult. That way, I make sure I'm not having to worry about presenting both sides, negative and positive, in the question stem. I can ask the same question, and it's a little easier to do so. Likert scales are frequently used to create a construct. And that's when you write multiple statements that are all related together, measuring the same topic, using the same scale. And an example of this would be, please indicate your level of agreement of how important each statement was as a motivating factor in your decision to join a CSA. And we have a scale going from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and then a don't know option for options that aren't relevant to them are applicable. So I have a strong desire for fresh food products. I have a strong desire to reduce packaging of my food products. I have a strong desire to develop a sense of community. And then they have a chance to agree or disagree. And then I can summate all of these items together, and I will have an overall score showing what are the motivating factors that influence that individual to participate in a community-supported agriculture program, which is basically getting a share of food weekly from a farmer. Another example would be when seeking out information about food choices, how frequently do you use the following information channels? And I go from never to always, and then I have all the channels available, and they're able to indicate the level of use using a Likert scale. And then I'll know which channels have been used always, ones that aren't used often, or never. And that can help me know how to communicate better with that respondents group, because I understand where they're getting their information from. Semantic differential scales are also known as bipolar rating scales. And you put down a name, a concept, a phrase at the beginning of the sentence, and then following it, you have a series of 5-point or 7-point scales that are anchored with bipolar adjectives, which means opposite. You usually pick 5 to 9 pairs, and these words are used to describe someone's attitude towards something, an attitude toward a task, an experience, or a concept. So here's an example. For me to participate in farm-to-school programming is good, bad, negative, positive, beneficial, harmful, useless, useful, valuable, worthless, difficult, easy. I have 6 bipolar adjectives that describe easily what someone's attitude would be toward participating in farm-to-school programming. You'll notice, though, that you rotate between a positive and a negative score. That is intentional. You do that to force the person to actually read the question and not just go down the construct and circle all 2s or all 3s or all 4s, but forcing them to actually read. Now, this does become tricky in data analysis because then you have to actually reverse code the items. So I would actually have to go into SPSS and reverse code all the answers for the good, bad, the beneficial, harmful, the valuable, and worthless adjectives, and completely change their scale. So a 7 becomes a 1, a 6 becomes a 2, a 3 becomes a 5, and a 4 remains the same. That can be tricky, but definitely easy to do in SPSS, and it can help avoid that issue of them wanting to answer all neutrally or all the same because the way you wrote the question. Another example is the attitude toward consuming grass-fed beef, and you can do a 7-point scale with these 5 adjectives, and then in Qualtrics you can calculate that from good, bad, negative, positive, beneficial, harmful, unhealthy, healthy, pleasant, unpleasant, and you can know whether or not a respondent is thinking that consuming grass-fed beef in their everyday diet would be a good thing or a bad thing, and why they have formed that attitude based on whether they think it's negative, positive, harmful, healthy, unpleasant, tasting. The other type of question is a rank order. You basically force respondents to indicate a priority among the number of alternatives. So please rank the following sources of information in order from your preference when you're seeking out news. Put a 1 next to the source you use the most, or a 5 next to the source you use the least, and so on. And in 2 sentences, I have clearly told them I want them to rank these channels and how I want them to rank, so that then they will understand what I'm asking them to do for this rank order. Now, to help you with some question development, I would encourage you to read Dillman's book, Internet, Phone, Mail, and Mixed Mode Surveys, the Tailored Design Method. It is one of the best resources for any social scientist wanting to do survey research. But if you're interested in Likert scales, there's a great article by Viagas. It's called Likert Type Scale Response Anchors, and it's just a list of possible anchor types that you can use. That document is available to you to download in Canvas in our module. If you have any questions or comments about survey design, please contact me through Canvas inbox or kelsey.hall@usu.edu. Thank you.